And with that, I'm going to move over to our guest. And so, Commander Ellison, I want to thank you for joining us tonight to talk about traffic and pedestrian safety. And I'm just going to hand the reins right on over.
All right. Well, thanks for having me today, guys. So like I said, my name is Jeremy Ellison. Currently working in the Traffic and Pedestrian Safety Unit. I've been a police officer with St. Paul for 25 years. And really enjoy working here. It's a great city. And traffic has always been one of my passions, pedestrian safety as well. So this is really one of those assignments that I really enjoy being in. So the Traffic and Pedestrian Safety is in charge of a couple of different things. We investigate all of the serious and fatal injury crashes that happen in the city. We also are in charge of all of the parking enforcement officers that work in the city. So under me, I have 3 investigators that do the crash investigations. And then I have 10 parking enforcement officers that do parking enforcement throughout the city. So one of the other big responsibilities that I have is managing our Towards Zero Deaths enforcement grant. This year it's right around $900,000 in overtime funding for extra police officers to go out and do traffic enforcement, speed enforcement, DWI enforcement, seatbelt enforcement, things like that. And we manage that grant for the entire county. So we do sub grants with all the agencies in Ramsey County. And then we also have our own officers working that stuff as well. So we do quite a bit of enforcement out there. We try to respond to as many of the complaints that we get. A lot of the complaints are relating to speed. So we're pretty fortunate right now. We also have some trailers, speed trailers. I don't know if you guys have seen those out and about, but we can place them in certain areas and it will actually collect some data for us as well as display speeds of vehicles as they're driving by. So that kind of warning folks, hey, you're driving too fast, slow down. The new trailers that we have actually have some flashing red and blue strobe lights. So we can set those to go off, or like on a 25-mile-an-hour road, we can have it flash at them at say 35. And then if they hit 40, we have the red and blue lights turn on and say, okay, this is egregiously fast. But then the nice thing about these trailers too, is we also get some data back. So we can put a thumb drive in the trailer and then it'll tell us all of the vehicles that went by, times of day when we're most likely to see speeders, the highest speed, things like that. So that way, when we get that data, we can go deploy officers to that area to do enforcement, to write citations, and hopefully slow people down and be more effective at what we do. So some of the other things that traffic safety grant does, we have a Stop for Me campaign, which is a pedestrian safety campaign. I know the district has been involved in that in the past. Many years ago, and then also more recently, I think we just did a event not too far from here up on, I think, Hoyt and Victoria maybe. Was it Hamlin?
It was right by the school.
We did, yeah, I think we might have done 2 that night, so we've done 2 of those. Yeah. And I'm still waiting on the final report from the sergeant that was in charge of that unit, but my understanding was pretty well received. We like to do those because they kind of give us an opportunity to go out and do education for pedestrians to teach them how to safely cross the street, as well as stopping those drivers that do fail to yield to a pedestrian, and give us that opportunity to have that educational conversation or issue a citation if it's an egregious violation. So yeah, I just like I said, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I wanted to kind of come and get an opportunity to tell you a little bit about what we're doing. But then also answer any questions that you guys have, or listen to any complaints you guys have about some of the traffic or parking related issues, because we do really want to be responsive to the needs of the community. So.
Great, thank you. Are there questions for Commander Ellison?
I think I put this trailer on Victoria.
You can tell me right now, and tell me, where do you want it, Victoria, and what?
Anywhere between the stop sign of the Roman and the lake, people can fly down.
Sure.
Between Larpenteur.
Yeah, it's like a mile.
I live across from St. Timothy Lutheran Church, and I'm assuming there's an app where I could have like do a radar thing just to, kind of, obviously it's not evidentiary, but my feeling is that traffic is going at least 35, 40, so people are going like the energy crisis speed of probably over 50 on that road, which is, wow. And not just now and then. I mean, that is That's become.
I see people right down the street, happy to, like, in the drive next to.
I've seen that before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right down the house.
Yep.
But I just saw someone when I walked over, just take off at Maryland, going north, it just.
Yeah, speeding has been unfortunately out of control in this city. And it's not just St. Paul, it's really throughout the state, I think, and throughout the country. But the unfortunate thing too with speed is the faster cars go, the more serious the crashes are. So we're seeing a lot more serious injury crashes and things like that. And the numbers had gone up quite a bit and then went down a little bit, but we're still higher than we want to be. But I'll get the speed trailer out there. So we just deployed our trailer today. Or I'm sorry, we deployed it yesterday. We moved it over to the west side for we'll have it there for about a week and a half, and then I can get it over in Victoria maybe in about a week and a half or two.
Wow.
Yeah.
For me, it's Front Avenue. I've been passed multiple times on Front.
I'm in Chatsworth.
And my specific intersection is Front Chatsworth, because my daughter lives south of Front and I live north, and when I walk to visit her, or when she comes, bringing my grandson in the stroller, right across Front, is at that I don't know what to do that. If there's some way to make that intersection safer, I would welcome it, because it's really hard, because I would catch the bus too. I get off that 3D bus there and I got to cross, and it's 5 o'clock and paying the cost. So no, there isn't Chatsworth down in Front, and even though there's the pedestrian crossing sign and all that, you really got to be careful. And one guy will stop going this way, and then you go partway off. You're just looking the way, the other way, or you're waiting to see if he gets past. And so that's my experience.
Yeah.
The other one that we kind of get recurring and serious complaints about is right outside the streetcar station near that events like Churchill, Horton,
Okay.
where the gardens are, because it's an unusual intersection, but I think there's an accident there just that last week. They took out one of the signs.
Okay.
So that's been brought up at our meetings before, and I've tried to elevate it before. Yeah. I'm also curious to know about your unit's relationship with PD traffic or public works traffic engineering, and when is the best time to call Jeremy, and when it's the best time to bother Randy at Public Works, and how do your departments work together, and would you be the first call before trying to get them to put bump outs in, and would you be a good resource to help advocate for those things when you identify them as needed to?
Yeah, and I was gonna say both, right? So Randy and I, Elizabeth Stifler and I work really closely together. So I would say I talk to them 4 out of 5 days a week, one of them. So when there's complaints, we do try to, both work on them, because a lot of times enforcement is usually that quick tool that we can kind of try and get in there and make some, get people to slow down or pay attention and things like that. But some of the longer term solutions, the bump outs, things like that, engineering changes, they take longer. And so that's Randy and Elizabeth and their team, their job to do. So, but I would say we definitely are good advocates for those things. One example I'll give you, and this is getting to be a little bit older, but several years ago we had the public housing high rise at 280 Rivu. They had come to us with a complaint about crossing Marion Street, and this was before Marion was redone. And so we went out there, we did a Stop For Me campaign, we took some photos, we wrote a report, sent it to Public Works, and ultimately that entire project ended up leading to where it is now, where they put the center medians in there, the bump outs in there, and really improve the pedestrian crossings. So that's one of those really successful examples of the collaboration that we have and the things that we can accomplish when we work together as a team. But I would say, some of these smaller things are good examples, and that's why I like to bring the Stop For Me campaign out to different places so we can collect that information, get feedback from the community members in real time, and then we write those reports up and submit them to Public Works and say, hey, we think that this would benefit from this treatment or that treatment, and then they'll come out and review it from their standpoint and see if it's something that's feasible and or what the timeline would be for doing things like that. So.
I have a question about the crosswalk on Lexington. Um, from, from the golf course into the park.
Okay.
Cause up at the golf course, there's the pedestrian lights, the flashing lights.
Okay.
And then, block down, there's another crosswalk where more people cross. But the cars just zip through there and like, do you know the history behind why there maybe isn't one of those lights at that crosswalk too? And
Don't know the history. I do know that we have done, with this district council many years ago, we did do a crosswalk event there. And I know that was one of the things that we talked to Public Works about, was trying to make some improvements there. But I also know that, those, they call them rapid rectangular flashing beacons, the RRFBs. It's a cost for installation and then the maintenance of ongoing stuff. So I know they don't like to put them everywhere, but, they are, as part of their kind of their operational procedures, they are looking at trying to figure out a good logical approach to trying to be able to put those and prioritize them in certain spots.
I
And
had
Abby-
a woman. What, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I can talk a little bit about the reason we've got the flashing lights in the one crossing there. So the crossing that is right across from the golf course entrance is relatively new. That one went in, I think, in maybe 2018 or 2019. And that was one that, like, through surveying that that D10 did, that was identified as a place where people darted across the road a lot. And because they were resurfacing the parking lots in the golf course and then the north and south parking lots at the pavilion and doing some water retention, we were able to add that in as kind of part of that project. And so, like, a few of us from D10 met with traffic and some of the construction folks. My understanding, though, is that beacon itself is like $50,000 just to have that beacon. We had originally asked if it could be at that location, the established crosswalk, and that was a no. We've also asked to have that sidewalk extended all the way down on the west side there, and the grading of the hill makes it such that it would be a very, very large scale project, and the city and the park has declined to do that. And so I think that the takeaway from that is, like, that flashing light exists because of the work the district council did in engaging the community and identifying some of those sites. And I think that's really one of our strongest tools. And so I would be surprised if they would spring for another one, a few hundred feet north of there. But I think it's a good example of, like, when it worked, when we actually were able to, like, have action. However, even that process took years, and the only reason it got traction was because we were able to tack it onto an existing project.
Thanks, Barney.
Commander, I wonder if you might be able to address a bike question.
Absolutely.
We've got 3 or 4 cyclists I can see already in this room. Do we have what's known as the Oregon stop, where if you're cycling, there's no one around, but there's a stop sign, you can just kind of slow down and keep going? Or is it required that a bike stop at every single stop sign, put your feet on the ground? Just curious what the rules are for that.
I believe the law changed either last year or maybe the year before, where bikes do not have to come to a complete stop. And I thought it was, maybe one of you guys might know better than me, but I thought it was both stop signs and stop lights.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Do you cite violators if someone just sort of plows through an occupied, a very dangerous intersection? Do you cite cyclists, or is that sort of low on your priorities?
It's pretty low on our priorities, but I will say, if it's something very dangerous that we observe, that's likely when we would take enforcement action. But out of all the enforcement activities that we do, I can't think of very many that we're writing bikes tickets, maybe 1 or 2 a year. It's really going to be low.
I also
Oh,
want
yeah.
to know if you could just settle one long-standing debate I've had with a friend. Is there such thing as bicycling while intoxicated? I just gotta know.
Well, there is not a crime of bicycling while intoxicated, no.
Okay. I mean, you obviously can cycle while intoxicated, but there's no law against it. Let's put it that way.
So, yeah, no, the DWI statute only covers motor vehicles.
Thank you.
Did that cover your lights?
It could cover any bike depending on, you know,
The throttle
What
or
the-
the pedal.
what the motor is.
But if
Yeah.
you cause damage, I stay on the bike, you still get scared.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to, is like, you know, if you're in. Basically, whether you're drunk or not, but if you're causing damage, or if you're, you know, at fault for a crash, then you can still be held responsible for whatever the violation was that led to that crash.
I got you. Thank you.
So we have a question in the chat, and I was gonna ask a related question anyway. We've had two large events in Como in the last 10 days, the Back to the 50s at the fairgrounds, and then the Hmong International Freedom Festival. Both of them have temporary no parking signs in the neighborhood, but they're done differently. The Hmong Freedom Festival, the no parking signs are done by the Public Works Department because it's on city property, and MSRA actually gets a permit and puts the no parking signs out themselves. Is there any difference in resulting enforcement of no parking through either of those channels? Because anecdotally, I've heard that Hmong Freedom Festival, the enforcement is much stronger, and I saw that myself. I was biking through the neighborhood and tickets on almost every car illegally parked. MSRA, I got an email from somebody saying that it's not enforced at all and signs are poorly placed, et cetera, et cetera. I disagree with most of that, but I will send you the feedback garden, who is from the MSRA in our meeting. But so from your standpoint, they're enforced identically. Your department is informed about them the same way. It's not different because it's through the city, or.
So the difference between the MSRA and the Hmong Freedom Festival. So Hmong Freedom Festival hires PEOs to work in the neighborhood. So that's why you're going to see additional enforcement. So there's extra PEOs on overtime that's funded by the Hmong Freedom Festival that they pay for to have. I think they had 2 PEOs from I don't remember the hours, but it was like morning and afternoon times to be out there during that event on both days. So that's why there was extra enforcement for that. Whereas the MSRA event, I do know that we got some calls for service where people were calling in parking complaints. In fact, I got a text from one of our PEOs about a sign that was up, whether it was legitimate or not, and it was a legitimate sign. So they did issue citations on those, but it's just unfortunately the demands often exceed our capacity, but we do the best that we can.
What's that was,
MSRA
Back
is
to the 50s.
Back to the 50s organization. Gordon, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'm just curious to know if there were any issues that you might be aware of regarding parking in Sub-District 1 during Back to the 50s weekend, last weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
I know we got a few parking complaint calls, which we, like I said, responded to as much as we could and did write some citations, but so as far as issues, that's what I would say is, you know, there were some complaints, but I don't know that it was anything over and above a normal event type parking complaint, so.
Well, let me follow that up with another question. The MSRA puts up 245 no parking signs on Wednesday morning before Back to the 50s and takes them down Sunday evening. Do you think they make a contribution to safety and whatnot in the Sub-District 1?
I don't know enough about, you know, that to give you a good answer on that, but obviously, you know, from the community's perspective, I think it's beneficial to make sure that we're regulating the parking and making sure things are safe down there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the other big one is the fair itself. And I know that the Fair Neighbors group that has formed over the past few years has developed a pretty good relationship with the police and a number of other entities. And I've heard that has really helped kind of coordinate things even better.
Yeah.
And so that's been improving. Do you have any thoughts or notes about the fair coming up again and any changes that your unit has in mind?
So from the parking perspective, we had a meeting, an internal meeting last Friday. And then I know there's a community meeting coming up too with that group. Stacy Murphy, the district chief in West, has been kind of spearheading that. So she's been including me on all the concerns. We will have additional PEOs on overtime that are funded through the fair. We're working in the neighborhoods to do enforcement to make sure that we are doing that. In fact, this year, we were trying to get some of our parking enforcement officers trained on bicycles so that we could have them out on bikes and do a little bit more geographical spread out enforcement activities without having cars and a little bit more productive, I would say. So we're still working on getting those guys trained, but right now they'll be out there doing extra enforcement. So.
Great. And of course, Falcon Heights is adding e-meters this year. I've actually got the contractor that they're using coming to our meeting in August, right before the fair. So we'll kind of get that overview from them. If the city is watching Falcon Heights and next year, 5 years from now, decides to try e-meters in our neighborhood, would your unit be involved in that decision-making and thought process, or?
I would imagine, yeah. In fact, I can tell you the city is watching. I'm trying to remember who I was just talking to, but somebody from Public Works was saying that they are excited about it to see it kind of as an external test to see what it looks like and how it looks and how it works.
Can I ask a question, sort of swing us over to the other side of the neighborhood? So we are, I think in general, there's been a lot of positive feedback in our meetings about the Dale Street restriping. What we also have heard, though, is that as a new traffic pattern emerges, there are some people who do not observe the new traffic pattern and use that center turning lane as just a second lane for themselves to pass and to usually pass at pretty high speeds. And I think in the very beginning, there was a lot of assumption that was people who just didn't know about the new traffic pattern. And I think now what we're seeing is more like that's just how some people are deciding to use the road because that's how they got to use it in the past and they want to keep using it that way. So knowing things like that, I guess my question is, how does your department, how would you address something like that? If there's sort of repeatedly folks who are using that turn lane, I assume it's probably the same handful of people. Are there, I know we have dedicated parking enforcement people, do we have officers who are out and their job is to drive around and be alert for moving violations? I think it's unclear to me if that's something St. Paul is doing these days, and I'm just curious how that works.
Yeah, so unfortunately, right now, we don't have a full-time traffic enforcement unit. That was something that went away with some of the budget cuts and things like that. And unfortunately, we're just short-staffed right now, so we don't have anybody dedicated to traffic enforcement. But that being said, what we do have is that TZD, or Towards Zero Deaths Enforcement Grant, which allows me to send overtime officers out and focus on certain problem areas. So I knew that the street on Dale got redone. I hadn't heard about the complaints, so I appreciate hearing that. But that's one of those things that I will put on our traffic complaint list, and then the officers who are working those overtime shifts monitor that, and they'll go out and focus on that. So what they can do is they'll be in the area, monitor that for speeding as well as any passing in the center lane, and when they see that, they'll stop cars and write citations for those violations.
Thank you. Other questions or comments while we have Commander Ellison here?
How much would it cost to buy one of those trailers?
I think the trailers were right around 40,000 a piece. They're expensive.
Oh, wow. They turned them on Victoria Street.
Yeah, there's the signs that have the radars in them too. Do you utilize those at all?
Yep, we do. So Public Works and I, we have a shared kind of dashboard that we put the locations of all the different dynamic speed signs as well as our trailers. And then so we also use those in different areas. Public Works moves those around. I'd say every, 12 weeks or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what their schedule is, but they do that throughout the summer, and then in the winter time, they just leave them over the winter and then move them again in the summer, so. But I know they try and put one in every single district council area, and then or maybe it's just city council wards, this must be what it is, because I don't think we have enough for every district council, but yeah.
I was around the stop for me that was at the Chelsea Heights PTO organized a couple weeks ago. And so we went and said hi because we're connected at the rec center. But they didn't time out, it was pretty hilarious. It was the same day as AU machine pitch on our fields. So when they're pulling people over on Hamlin, it was a very good like shame because we had a whole crowd of baseball fans watching you get pulled over. That was pretty good time in there.
No, those events are pretty fun. Like I said, they're really good educational opportunities for everybody, and I like the engagement with the community too. It's just good opportunity for everybody to meet their police officers that are doing that traffic enforcement in the area, and then the cops get to hear from the community members kind of some of the concerns, and it kind of just makes it that much more important to them as well to be out there and enforcing those laws.
We have another question in the chat. Is there any initiative towards accidents, deaths caused by misuse, reckless use of the electric scooters?
There's been a lot of discussions about scooters lately. In fact, we've had some pretty serious injury crashes on those electric scooters. I have been involved in some discussions about specifically to Harriet Island. In that park down there, because we've had a lot of street racing complaints down there, and I've actually been down there for the past 4 weeks in a row on the weekends, and I've seen people riding in scooters at high rates of speed and doing a lot of dangerous things in the streets and on the pathways down there. And we were actually able to work with Public Works and Park and Rec and the Lime Scooter Company. They were able to put all of the scooters in that geographical area on what they call turtle mode. So they can only go a certain speed, which greatly reduced any potential impact to the pedestrians and themselves. And then the other thing that they did is they were able to shut them off completely at park close. So when the park closes, they stop working. And so that has been really helpful. I'm not sure what that looks like citywide, or if there's something specific to Como, if there's something that would be of interest to you guys here as far as Como Park, but that would be an option. I know Parks has the ability to do certain things like that. And then as far as like from the enforcement perspective, those scooters are looked at similar to bicycles. They're not motor vehicles as much as they are more like a bicycle. So we do try to encourage people to ride safely, but it's not something that we're necessarily stopping and writing citations for all the time. So in fact, very rarely, again, similar to bicycles, very rarely are we writing tickets to those folks, but we still will do education.
You mentioned street racing. I know that was a huge problem a couple of years ago. I sense that it's a little bit more under control these days. Street racing, street takeovers, things like that. I know Energy Park Drive's a problem area because of that, just straight away. How much of a problem is that right now relative to a few years ago?
Much less. In fact, I was talking with some of the troopers who work that stuff regularly, and they said that there really hasn't been any takeover activity for a couple of years. They said the complaints we were having down at Harriet Island were specific to revving engines, squealing tires, excessive speeds, things like that, loud exhaust. And it just got to be where it was just really a big concern for the neighborhood down there. So we ended up using some of our TZD enforcement dollars to put some extra overtime officers down there, focusing on that. And we actually have seen quite a big change. We're still having some groups gather down there, but we really are not having the excessive squealing tires, revving of engines, things like that. We've written a few citations, and that seems to have curbed the problem down there. So hopefully that will continue. But I know, like I said, I've been working with the State Patrol and then some of the intel analysts from Ramsey County that do a good job of monitoring that throughout the whole metro. And there's been some, racing activity. If you saw the news a couple weeks ago, there was an incident down in Egan where two vehicles were racing and one of them struck a light pole, and there was a double fatality in that vehicle. So it is happening out there, but not to the extent that we have seen it in the past.
The MSRA has a name for those folks. We call them street squirrels.
Yeah, we definitely like the MSRA crowd better than the young kids that are driving fast. And
I know you're obviously like the enforcement aspect of this too, but I think about things like, partnering to get the scooters to go reduce speeds and other things. So I'm just curious if there's other, partnerships that you have to help kind of try to reduce some of this, or the enforcement aspect, or is there another piece that's also trying to kind of more do behavioral change?
yeah, I don't know the full answer to that one. I can tell you, I think, a lot of enforcement is both education and enforcement together. So, I think about pedestrian safety work that we've done, and we've partnered with the U of M and some of the scientists there on doing some research studies about how do we really affect these changes and get people to stop for pedestrians. And some of the work that they were doing back in 2018-ish, when we were doing that big study, they would put up feedback signs and say, X percentage of St. Paul drivers stop for pedestrians. It was kind of that, more people are doing this, we should do this too, and kind of social norming and trying to get, so that is intriguing to me, and thinking about that, it's a combination of both that enforcement, like, okay, if I don't stop, I might get a ticket, and everybody's stopping. And it's true, because honestly, the more people see other drivers stopping, then they stop. Like if I'm going southbound and I stop far enough back that it's clear that I'm stopping, the people coming the other way will see that and, okay, what's going on? Oh, okay, pedestrian. So it really does make a big difference if we all work together and follow the rules. But yeah, as far as partnerships, that's one of the things that we're always looking for is, different ideas, different thoughts. Part of the TZD coalition is combining education, enforcement, engineering, and everyone else. So that's like the community groups and things on solving these problems, because we can't write enough tickets to solve the problem. We know that. So yeah, it really is a combination. But we also know that being out there and having cars being stopped, if I stop, car in Lexington and 100 cars drive by me, they're more than, it's like giving a warning to 100 people, like, okay, they're out here paying attention. So it's kind of a combination.
Other questions or comments for Commander Ellison? All right. Well, thank you so much for visiting with us, and for hearing our pleas for the different places around the neighborhood that could use a little bit of attention. We really appreciate the communication.